Welcome to SaharaTv. Please, can you introduce yourself for the benefit of our audience?
My name is Jaye Gaskia. I convene Protest to Power movement. I'm also the convener of Take Back Nigeria.
Oh, nice to have you, Mr. Gaskia, in our studio.
Thank you very much.
A little bird actually whispered to us that you'll be contesting, or you have the ambition of contesting for the presidency in Nigeria. What informed the decision?
Okay, so two things first.
Okay.
Yes, definitely I'll be contesting. Two, it is not an ambition, it's a mission. We're on a mission. And so what has informed that decision? If you look at the trajectory of our history since independence, and particularly since the 1999 return to civil rule, since the Fourth Republic, inauguration of the Fourth Republic, you can plot very clearly, a graph of the decline in the quality of leadership, as well as in the quality of services provided by that leadership over time. And that we are, at this point in our history, is down to that, that decline. And we have been ruled successively, we've been governed successively by people who are simply motivated by their self-interest. And even as a ruling class, they have also declined in the context of having articulating a collective self-interest that is called enlightened self-interest. So much so that what drives them now is individual, selfishness and greed. And that's quite responsible for where we are at this stage in our history. The fact that corruption is on this scale, the fact that virtually abandoned development, the fact that the state that was conceived at independence as a developmental state is now a state that is an irresponsible state, a state that has abandoned all responsibility to its citizens. And we cannot continue along this trajectory and hope that we are going to keep this nation together. If you look at the last 2 years, particularly 2015 seemed to Nigerians, ordinary Nigerians, as if it was going to mark a point where there would be some rupture from the decadence that was going on. But 2.5 years down the line, it's now very clear that it's more like jumping from fry pan into the fire. So you have a situation where it's very clear that the ruling class is completely bereft of ideas in terms of how to get out of this crisis. And that's where there is no governance that is taking place. So that means that it's important that there should be an intervention. It's important that ordinary Nigerians should, begin to think and reflect very clearly that this country belongs to them, and that they should take back their country from this pack of wolves. And so that's the mission that we are on. It's a mission that is awakening Nigerian citizens to get ordinary Nigerian citizens to understand that at the root of the crisis the existential crisis that we face is a greedy ruling class, and that if we must get out of this and get to a situation where the resources of the country are actually used for its citizens, then we need to displace this ruling class. And so that's where we are.
So going by all that you've said, do you think that Nigeria is at a breaking point?
Absolutely, and I will tell you why we are at this point. Why I think so at this moment. Again, I go back to 2015. 2015 was an experiment for the ruling class. What I call the national ruling class consensus had broken down around 2012, 2013. And so in an attempt to reconstitute a new ruling class consensus, they hurriedly put together the present ruling party, the All Progressive Congress. But because the very fundamentals of that consensus had broken down, they are still trying to put that together. And so it is against that background, for example, that you can understand even what the people are now calling, for example, Obasanjo's letter, for example, to the current regime. That letter is the single most significant indication of the panic within the ruling class.
So in all that you've said now, how do you intend to salvage the situation? considering that you have the mission to contest for president?
So there are a few things that we need to do. First is that it's important that ordinary Nigerians understand that they have a chance actually in 2019 to make a difference. And our electoral system is getting better in terms of the opportunities for fraud, electoral fraud gradually being reduced. They've been reduced over the years. So, but the biggest challenge is that the majority of Nigerians who are of voting age are not politically active. They are not registered to vote. They are not. They don't go out to vote in election day. So in 2015, we had 58 million Nigerians who collected PVC from a population of 180 million. By our population, the demographics of our population, you expect a minimum of about 100 million people to be on the voters register. 58 million collected PVC. Of those 58 million, only 28 million voted in the elections. Of the 28 million that voted, only 15 million voted for the person that won, in a population of 180 million. So, and the rest of us, we stay outside, we talk, we are angry, you know, and we talk on the sidelines, we talk on the streets and the rest of that. So now, the one way that we can transform our anger into action is by getting onto the voters register and to make sure that we vote. Now, the second thing is that in voting, because Nigerians, one of the reasons why Nigerians have abstained from voting is that they say there is no choice. So in 2015, for example, most people simply said, okay, we vote for the better of the two evils. I mean, nobody actually said good. They said the better of the two evils, you know. So it means that we then have to provide an alternative that is viable and that is a positive one. And so that takes me to, okay, so what is it that we will do? How can we correct, you know, the rot that we have already in the system? And I say that, we say in the movement that we have 5 cardinal programs. So one, we are talking about universal citizenship. Secondly, we are talking about democratic local governance. Thirdly, we are saying that the economy must be democratically managed. And fourth, we are saying that public institutions, public corporations should not be privatized, and that those public corporations should be democratically managed, you know, by their workers. And then fifth, you know, we're also talking about, you know, the provision of basic services, you know, education and the rest of that. Now, if I should just say very clearly, and why universal citizenship is at the root of what we are saying, is that when you look at part of the crisis in Nigeria today is the question of citizenship. And because citizenship is not defined, properly defined, so the question of your rights as a citizen is also not properly defined. So we are in a country where we have one of the most beautiful constitutions in the world. People say it is, you know, defective, but if it is made to work, it can actually work. But the constitution says that calls you a citizen of Nigeria, and then goes on to then say, in terms of doing certain things, having access to certain amenities, to certain opportunities, it's on the basis of your state of origin, and that you must be an indigene of a state. So that the implication of that, therefore, is that once you step out of your so-called state of origin, your citizenship is somewhat diminished. You are no longer really a full citizen. In 21st century Nigeria, more than 50% of our population live outside of their so-called state of origin. So what we are going to do is that we need to enforce a universal citizenship where citizenship would be, rights will be based on residency. You are resident somewhere, you are a Nigerian, you are resident anywhere in Nigeria, you are entitled to all the rights, all the human rights that a Nigerian is entitled to, regardless of where you are. Sometimes you can even look at some of the very stupid things that citizenship, that not allowing citizenship has done to us. State governments, all state governments do, they set up funds, 30 billion, 20 billion, you know, to support small scale traders and the rest of that. Part of the condition is that you must be an indigene of the state. I know in many states of the federation, majority of the traders are not from that state. So how do you, so you can see how these things turn not to benefit us. Lagos State, for example, now, according to our population figures, Lagos State has a population of about 20-something million. But in reality, we all know that Lagos, people who reside in Lagos will be closer to 40 million. But how did they arrive at 20 million? Because when we are doing census, it's the people who said Lagos is their state of origin that they put in Lagos, not people who are living in Lagos. So it distorts the way we plan, and we need to correct that. So that's the basic foundation. That's the basic thing that we need to correct.
I want to believe that you're an activist, and there have been so many activists in the past who tried to dabble into politics, and majority of them have been unsuccessful. So how do you think you can cut off from being an activist to a successful politician?
Okay, now what I will say is that I will never become a politician. Okay. So I'm not going to become a politician, because you know what, again, there's really, we should try to de-emphasize that, because there shouldn't be a profession called being a politician. There shouldn't be a career called being a politician. You are a journalist, for example. Okay, I am a peace and security and governance person. You know, so that's my career. That's my profession. I go into politics for service. Unfortunately, in this country, being a politician has become a career. So much so that you ask somebody, "What do you do?" Say, "I'm a politician." I mean, do you study being a politician in school? You know, and so on and so forth. And
political science.
Yes, political science, but that is studying the science of politics.
Yes,
you see, so exactly. So I know. I just wanted people to understand. So now, but having said that, there are also 2 or 3 categories of activists that have gone into politics, that have gone to for service. Okay. And I will talk about Gani Fayemi last, because it's the closest to that I can talk to. There are activists that have gone into politics, okay, and that have looked for shortcuts to power. And so in doing that, what they have done is that they have gone into politics by looking at the parties that are the strongest in their locality, and they join those parties because they want to contest, you know, election and the rest of that. And sometimes they get burnt. Sometimes they are even allowed to go there, but you get there. But of course, because you are living, you are a tenant in a house that is not yours, you have very limited control, you know, over how you can redesign, you know, the house. So they have a problem. And then there are the activists who simply also dismiss, you know, politics. Now then there are those like that of the Gani Fayemi tradition, who actually really wanted to make a change, and which was why he also understood that he was not going to enter into any of the into a borrowed house. He was not going to be a tenant in a house. So together with his colleagues and his followers, and we were some of his followers then, you know, he started National Conscience Party. So as a vehicle, because that was a distinct, you know, party, it has a distinct ideology and the rest of that. And essentially that's what we're also doing now. We are building Take Back Nigeria as a political movement. It's not a political party, but we're building it as a political movement that can be at the center of an alliance of political forces, including political parties, that endorse the vision of that movement. When Nigerians say that people's votes are bought and the rest of that, we know that the majority of the people whose votes can be bought are already voting. Okay? The majority of the people who are loyal to one godfather or godmother are already voting. So we have no illusions. I mean, if we think that it is by convincing those 28 million that we are going to win, we are not going to win. So our focus is on those who, for one reason or the other, because they have always felt that there is no choice, because they have always felt that politics is dirty, those people who have stayed out of, you know, performing their civic duty, those are the people we are concentrating on. So part of our strategy is also getting people to go out to register. So our focus, particularly on the youth, on the younger generation, they're very angry. I mean, they say that the younger generation have received half-baked education, but even that half-baked education, which is the formal one, but the education that they have received because of their exposure, because of their connection to the internet, they see what is happening elsewhere in the world. They are chatting with friends in other parts of the world. They see that things are working. So they are angry, you know, and our message to them is that this anger is going to be useless if you don't convert your anger into a PVC.
At what point do you intend to upgrade the movement into a party, or would you contest under a totally different party?
Essentially, the movement might eventually become a party and probably post 2019. That's the movement itself, Take Back Nigeria. But like I said now, what we're actually doing now is that we're building the movement, Take Back Nigeria, but we're also building an alliance of political forces, which will include some political parties, as well as some other forces, including labor unions, trade unions, traders associations, as many organizations as possible that can endorse, the program that we have. So what it therefore means is that eventually, for 2019 elections, given the fact that right now, by our laws, you can only contest if a party, if you are the candidate of a party. It is one of those parties that in the alliance that would run on in terms of flying the flag. But it's also an alliance that will include more than one party.
One question that I know that our audience would really, really like to know is to know your antecedent, the antecedent that you have that makes you think you're qualified to occupy the highest seat in the Nigerian political space.
And it's going to be very surprising because my most significant antecedent is that I'm a Nigerian citizen. At the risk of sounding very immodest, I know that I'm at the top of my game in my profession. I mean, if you are looking at for peace and security experts in this country, I'm one of the first 10, if you're going to mention them. I have been at the top of my game in terms of management positions. I have worked with international NGOs. I have been a country director, of an international NGO. I've been deputy country director, and I've been a global conflict advisor for an international NGO, like managing for the 5 countries. So I mean, I know this. That's from the professional management angle. But I've also been an activist since I became an adolescent. From my university days, I was in the student movement. I was in the pro-democracy movement. I was part and parcel of the anti-military struggle. Okay, yes, we were younger, because we were not always this old. so we were younger then, but we took part in that, and even right from that moment, played leadership roles. I've been very active in the, I do not think that there is a sector of struggle in Nigeria that I've not been active in. I've been active in the environmental struggle. I was part of the leadership of the Niger Delta struggle for resource control. I'm not from the Niger Delta. I was part of their leadership. I've been part of the pro-democracy movement. I've been part of that leadership. And currently I'm based in Abuja. I've been part of struggles there too as well. So I know this country. I know what the challenges are. I know that the solutions to our problems have been available for decades. It's that we need to alter the processes and the systems, and then to also have the courage to be able to implement those solutions, because the solutions are not new. If you want to talk about our perennial crisis, energy crisis and fuel crisis, the solutions have always been there. But the ruling class will not adopt those solutions because it is not in their economic interest. So they make a lot of gains from importing refined products. So they would not want the refineries to work. They make a lot of gains from providing alternative energy, generators and the rest of that. So our power system would never work and the rest of that. So, and we need people who can actually break that mold and return Nigeria to...
The electoral process in Nigeria, do you see it as expensive?
It is. It is very expensive.
So how do you intend to fund your campaign?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the electoral system is extremely very expensive. Even though if you look at the Electoral Act itself, the figures appear to be very pragmatic. So in the Electoral Act, it says 1 billion for presidential election, but we do know that in Nigeria, it's not 1 billion. It's
even 1 billion is a lot.
Yes, but I mean, if you look at that, yeah, but we know that they spend like billions, 100 billion, and the rest of that. Mind-boggling figures. So how do we intend to fund this campaign? And that's why we are saying that we are building a movement. So it's a movement that's going to be owned by people. If you want to take back Nigeria, organize Take Back Nigeria, and that's the way we also intend to raise funds. We don't actually want money bags. We don't want people, because we don't want to be owned by anybody, and we don't want to owe anybody any favors, you know. So that's one of the ways we are going to do it. And we are going to also be very simple with the way with things. I've said this to people around me. I said, when official campaigning is the so-called ban on official campaigning is lifted, that's when we get to that point in the INEC timetable when we can actually begin campaigning. What we are going to do is simple. We are going to go around this country in a road show. Nobody's flying, nobody's doing anything. 90 days on the road, know your country. And we think we do things like this, we are going to reduce expenses, we are going to cut costs, we are going to make things minimal, and whatever funds we also raise, we are going to be extremely very transparent about it. We raise funds, say this is how much we have raised, this is how much we have spent, this is what we have spent it on.
State policing is one national issue people would really, really like to know your opinion on. Do you think it will solve Nigeria's internal security issues? As
somebody with a background in security and governance, I can say very clearly that the challenges that we have around security are both structural, so in terms of the structure of it, in terms of the content of it, and in terms of the dimensions of it. So we need to look at that. So the structural part of it is also, you look at whether you need one single police force or whether you need to decentralize the police force in such a way that you have the federating units can also have their own police. So I totally believe that and think that the correct thing to do is to have state police, to have, you know, state police. In fact, if it's possible to have state police, to have local government police, to even have community watches formalized as part of the policing, you know, architecture for the country, and with each having clearly defined mandates and jurisdictions. So the federal police, if the current Nigerian police is now transformed into a federal police, the federal police should deal with issues that are cross-border.
What's your opinion on local government autonomy? So
local government should mean, for example, a county government, which is like our own local government, but it should also mean a community government. You know, because those are the governments at that level. So yes, we need to have that. Now, on local government autonomy, what you can guarantee, because a federation really is a relationship between two entities. It's not between three entities, regardless of how many tiers of administration that you have. But essentially, it's between two entities, a federal entity and then the federating unit. And therefore, powers over tiers of administration lower down the federating unit should properly reside with the federating unit. Now, but having said that, our constitution right now guarantees local government autonomy. The only problem is that there is no penalty for breaching it. So Chapter 7 of the Constitution, for example, says that we shall have a system of democratically elected local governments. But then that same chapter did not now also impose any penalty if you violate it. So for local government autonomy to be strengthened, what we need to do is to introduce a penalty. So if you are running, if you are having local governments and they are not democratically elected, then a state it should be possible for a state to be sanctioned. You know, so those are the kind of institutional safeguards that we need to put in so that it will guarantee that. But as for the creation of local government and the rest of that, it should be left to a state.
Our power sector is one sector with huge issues, same as the educational sector. So how do you intend to solve these two problems if you eventually become president of Nigeria?
The biggest challenge with our education system at the moment, one, is that public funding of education is dwindling, is reducing because the state is abdicating its role to the private sector. And so you are beginning to have the state is encouraging more private schools. And the challenge with that is that it reduces access because we are also having a situation where more people are becoming poor. So it means that they will not be able to afford the education. You are reducing funding for public education, meaning quality of public education is declining, okay? But then you are creating a second tier of education, which is private education. The lower end of private education is actually as bad as public education in terms of quality. They just collect money from people and teach our children nothing. The higher end of it is even worse. They are taught something, but they are not taught Nigeria. So they are not educated for Nigeria. And then it's far worse for educating your wards or your kids abroad, so that they are not fit. It's not an education that is focused on transforming their own society. We need to provide opportunities for our young persons who are learning to also learn practically. So opportunities for internship. Again, the relationship between industry and the educational institutions, so opportunities for internship and the rest of that. The biggest challenge with the power sector is that we are investing in big projects, big power generation projects. If you do not, therefore, invest in transmission, okay, no matter how much power we are able to generate, we would not be able to transmit them. Okay, now, so it means that we need to balance investment in generation, distribution, and transmission. Now, the second big challenge with the power sector, which is the privatization and the way they were privatized, that incompetent persons bought these things. I mean, we need to be able to face up to that challenge, do a complete review, technical assessment of the privatization and of what they have been doing and whether they have met up to the agreements that they signed onto, and begin to find a way of getting out of this, or renegotiating, or bringing in people who can do a better job, or forcing those companies to actually get real technical partners who can actually do the job. And it's up to us to really do that. We need to start focusing on micro and mini scale generation, distribution, and transmission. We need to actually start thinking of localized grids.
Thank you so much for coming into the studio today, Mr. Jaye Gaskia. It's a pleasure to have you in SaharaTv.
It's my pleasure too. Thank you for having me.